thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us.
All right. Good morning, fam. It is Thursday, February 19th, 2026, and you are tuned in to High at 9 News. Thank you for joining us. Today is National Iwo Jima Day. Much honor to, there we go. National Arabian Horse Day. Go get your horses. National Vet Girls Rise Day. I don't know what that is, guys. Jason gives me the days.
What is that one?
I don't know. Does someone want to look it up while I keep going? Oh, National Vet Girls. Is that me? Like veteran? So who are girls?
Or you're a veterinarian.
Or vets. Whatever. Vets. Congratulations. I hope it's either one. And National Lash Day, ladies. Get them lashes done if you want, as well as National Chocolate Mint Day. Thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It is also high noon on the East Coast. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above and down below to see exactly where we live on the internet. Jason is out today. I will be hosting for you. We are live every Monday to Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, and our very own website, High at 9 News. So thank you all for joining us. We are going to jump straight into our first story of the day, and we're going to be running through the program today pretty quickly. No commercial breaks. You're going to love it. Maybe one in the middle. But let's dive into this right now. Our top story for the day: Minnesota cannabis regulators are going to launch a statewide listening tour next month ahead of expanded adult use market. The Minnesota's Office of Cannabis Management will begin a statewide listening tour next month as regulators prepare for continued explosion of the state's adult use marijuana market. The agency announced that its Connecting with Community tour will officially kick off March 12th. With initial stops in Pine County and Cloquet, followed by a public listening session in Duluth on March 13th. The event will be held at Lake Superior College. It is so hard not to get a Minnesota accent when I start reading about Minnesota. I grew up split between Texas and Minnesota, so I have two accents. Plus Spanish when I'm angry. The event will be held at Lake Superior College from 3 to 4:15 p.m. with media availability beginning at 2:30 p.m. The tour is designed to gather input from Minnesotans on cannabis policy, the rollout of adult use marijuana sales, and emerging opportunities for consumers, license holders, and communities as more marijuana businesses open across the state. According to the Office of Cannabis Management, staff will, throughout Minnesota over the coming months, host open public meetings and engage directly with local government officials, tribal nations, grant recipients, marijuana and hemp businesses, and community organizations, don't you know? The effort is intended to provide updates every in this script is going to get me now. The effort is intended to provide updates on the agency's progress and collect feedback that will help shape future cannabis policy and priorities. Executive Director Eric Tubble will represent the agency at Duluth and is expected to meet with local media prior to the public session. Get out there, guys. Even if you're not a major mass media producer, if you are a cannabis content creator or advocate, go get out there. Independent journalism is seeing a whole new wave. Minnesota legalized adult use marijuana in 2023, and regulators have spent the past several years building out the licensing and oversight framework for cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers. As additional businesses begin operating statewide, regulators say the listening tour will help ensure the program evolves in line with community needs and market realities. Additional tours, stops, and public events are expected to be announced in the coming weeks. What do you got to say about that, gentlemen? A listening tour.
Yeah, are they going to actually do anything? I've been a part of these, okay, and you give them your best information, and then they go back behind closed doors, and not much gets done. So I would hope that they actually listen, okay, and put things into action that the voters really want. Because my experience is these turn out to be very performative, and a lot of memes go out and pats on your back and all that kind of shit. In the final analysis, something actually get done, and what was done, did it actually make sense and solve a problem? I'd like to see that.
I would love to see that too. I would also love to see your face, Dale. Can we cut to the four of us? I feel weird when it's just, there we go.
Oh.
Dale, thank you. I'm listening.
Well, look, I'm an ugly old fart. You don't need to see me up close. Come on.
No, we want to see Dale. You guys,
Yeah, right.
we know I have good resting face. So maybe, look, and we can see Dale's beautiful face.
Oh, now you're lying.
I agree with you. I agree. It's a lot of hot air. But I do think it's still really important for people to go and meet their legislators, because even what happens in the public scene, it might be hot air in front of cameras, but when you get behind the scenes, you can actually get to those legislators and start to turn some wheels. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go. And I love that they're at least trying it. And it seems like Minnesota has one of the better track records for states trying to figure this out earnestly. But Stone, Nate, what do you guys got?
If keyword is if regulators really listen to the growers, retailers, tribes, and communities, then this thing has a shot at being more than just legalization on paper. If
that's where my concern is, trying to open up to everybody. I noticed you mentioned cannabis and hemp, which is a very early and interesting area to create, to distinguish between those two, since, hint, we know that it's technically the same thing for all intents and purposes, unless they really are talking to industrial hemp agriculturalists alongside the cannabis people, in which case, let's see what happens. But again, it seems like it's very open,
I think they're going to do both, because Minnesota, what I've heard from the legislators in Minnesota, and I want to shout out real quick, people who helped them pass legislation in the beginning, Blunt Strategies, those ladies, they're a lot. I kind of relate to those girls, those women, because they did a lot of the footwork on the ground. And I do believe, because you have advocates like the folks at Blunt Strategies working with legislators in Minnesota and retailers, and you have Minnesota legislators listening and realizing they cannot eliminate the hemp market, that it should be a part of their cannabis market, not a competitor to their marijuana market. The two things go together. I do think that you're going to see both, especially we've seen this huge expansion of beverages in that category, in the THC categories out in Minnesota and hemp, specifically because alcohol industry was struggling. Craft operators were looking for solutions. Craft beer in Minnesota has always been a thing. And the same would apply to these kinds of breweries when it comes to THC beverages and supporting them. And they're realizing this is not an economy that they really want to disrupt. So we'll see. We'll see. But I do think that they mean to include consumable hemp, and it's not just baloney.
I agree. I'd love to hear
Interesting.
what our old colleague Rochelle had to say about this, her home state.
Mhm.
We had a project there, and I suspect it's still sort of going on. And I was hopeful when I read their laws that they would actually try to implement this in the face of usual, nonsense, the children and stuff like that. It seemed like they were going to be a little more mindful. But then, as usual, politics stepped in. And when politics steps in, it's not logical. It's very hard to disrupt, when someone just doesn't like weed, and I'm going to do everything I can to, trip this thing up. I don't know what you do about that. So it's like there's like Missouri is another place where you think this is hopeful and they actually implement it. I would like to see it, because out here in California, they have screwed the pooch out here. I mean, it is horrible what they've done.
Can I ask an ignorant? It's going to come off super ignorant, especially because I work in policy and lobbying, but I would love to, when y'all have these, now that California has had an established market for some time, have you noticed significant fall off in the people who still participate in trying to influence the legislature or showing up to talk about the things that are hurting your market? Because I have noticed and this applies not just to cannabis, but also primaries and then general elections. We get a lot of fire on the front end and people show up, but then when we actually start to write the laws, or laws are put in and we don't like them, people get disenfranchised and then they stop participating altogether, and it makes things 10 times worse. What are you seeing on the ground out in California? Are people still showing up, or are we complaining and not showing up? Help educate
It's
me.
what you like the image that you just painted right there is what happens. Disenfranchised is one way to put it. Fatigued would be another way to put it. You already have seen this not changing anything. These people have, in control here of our industry, have already made their disdain for us super clear. They're not here to help us. They steer clear of helping us. At a certain point, it might almost sound like you're watching a scenario play out, maybe on TV or a movie, with an obvious bully, and how much after they've bullied for literal years, they call it nearly a decade, bullying the same group of people, and those people have basically the only answer that anybody's come up with to survive is that you have to either become as big as the bully with as much money as them, or you have to go to another school. Like, that's the equivalent here, right? So at this point, going to pandering to, asking for attention from this proverbial bully, what do you expect? They're not, their stance, how they feel about you. Asking for help at this point from them seems like, at best, a waste of time, at worst, sheer weakness.
Well, I've got a very big headache from banging my head against the wall out here in California. I remember in Berkeley, 25 years ago or so, Steph Shear and ASA, we literally had crates with plywood on top of it. There was energy. People were moving forward. We saw it. A lot of groups came forward. Cal Normal was very active, and we could actually get to the legislature and get some things done. So there was a lot of, ginned up politics at our level. Okay, after legalization came forward, it didn't take long to figure out that we were the redheaded stepchildren. That the SB 420 period here, the collective cooperative, it soured a lot of people in the legislature, because the typical meme was some guy standing next to his Ferrari with gold all over himself. It's all for the patients. Okay? There was a mindset developed when we put legalization, and they still think we're just a cash cow, and we should sit down and shut up and be thankful that we're getting anything. Okay? And right now, the organizations still active seem to be putting a whole lot of effort into raising money, and what they're actually getting done is just hard to find. And I don't know what to say about that. I'm the Groucho Marx kind of guy. I don't want to belong to any organization that would dare to have me as a member. So that's my thinking about a lot of these groups. And I myself I tried to get something done here in the state, and I'm not saying I'm throwing up my hands, but I'm disgusted with what I'm seeing out here. My article from yesterday, sort of the tip of the iceberg about the political machine. We are not, we're on the menu. We're not at the table. That's part of the problem we have out here. And it's just very difficult to watch. And I think that a lot of average Mary and Joe Doke citizens are looking at this and going, no, you need to bring this to us because we'll fix it. The legislature just won't. And when you can't get the government to listen to you, your advocacy groups lose a lot of credence. And that's really where we are. They haven't got shit done. Okay?
So I'm feeling like from Texas, I know that Callie, don't get all mad because I know you've been in this game for a minute and no one is discrediting that. But I'm saying what worked for us here in Texas was that we realized, and this is kind of what this show is about too, and then we'll hop into the next story because I want to be mindful of time. When, yes, you're going to get disenfranchised, and that's how politics work. They want you to get disenfranchised. The system is designed for you to get tired so the system can do what the system does. But what really seemed to work this year, and we'll see because we're also getting rulemaking from dishes, and let's see what rules we actually get. We got the veto and we fought off the ban, but a lot of that was because I think the people locally started to realize how much influence and power we had as an industry as far as getting the word out with the community. And then it became an issue that could not be ignored because so many hundreds of people from the general public were showing up. And hopefully California can find a way to get that kind of momentum again. I know that there are a lot of big issues on the table for the elections right now, and this is a cannabis focused show, but I still have faith, and this is for all of you guys out there. Maybe this is why I felt compelled to say it. I still have faith that when the people show up in mass, they have no choice but to listen. Unfortunately, it is really hard to stick that all the way through the rulemaking process, and it takes a lot of commitment, and everybody's got a 9 to 5. But we'll see what happens. Good luck, Minnesota. Do better than Cali.
But Texas is a Republican capture, like California is a Democratic capture. And when you look, and even Florida, when you try to get something actually accomplished, they pull the rug out from underneath you at the policymaking level. So you can show up all you want and jump up and down. What we're actually getting accomplished on red and blue states is we're not getting shit done. And it's very
100%. You're so right about that. And I would be remiss to think that it was only our activism that got that veto. I am very much well aware it was likely also campaign donations, and that money moves the needle no matter how hard you work. Next, Missouri marijuana audit finds licensing issues, customer privacy concerns. Let's dive into this story, and we can stay on the Foursquare. Missouri's marijuana program generated more than $255 million in tax revenue last year, but a new state audit found significant problems with the licensing process that cost the state $12.5 million in legal fees. State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick released findings, which you can find linked in the story at highat9news.com. Wednesday afternoon, showing regulators have cut corners when awarding businesses licenses, leading to widespread appeals and additional court costs. Despite the issues, the program received a fair rating, so it's fair, because of a large scope of implementing marijuana legalization, from scratch. The audit found significant problems when reviewing applications for marijuana business licenses. Somebody do this to the Texas medical licensees. Some applicants revealed their identity on what was supposed to be an anonymous scorecard. And I'm not gonna lie, I had documents watermarked to shit, like boop, boop, boop. And if you have the right brand voice, then they're gonna know who you are anyway. And scores varied widely, even when answers were the same. The flawed process led to 68 additional licenses being awarded because of appeals and cost the state $12.5 million to defend in court. Issues damn, guys, just have open licenses for the love of God. Issues, you don't have all of this bureaucratic process and rulemaking that you have to get right if you just open the market. Issues that we found in the report and the application scoring was probably contributing to a large number of appeals that would have otherwise existed if some of those deficiencies in the scoring process had not existed, Fitzpatrick said. The audit also found that dispensaries may be keeping sensitive customer information without permission, say it isn't so, and could be unknowingly selling individuals more than the legal limit. Fitzpatrick said this could lead to public safety issues. I disagree. If somebody, I like protect privacy. You don't need to manage how much people are consuming. If somebody is able to get more than they should, they could provide it to others and circumvent the protections. Oh my God, stop trying to control the trap through individual. You guys, the trap is it's out there. Stop. I can't. This article is making me laugh too much. The Department of Health and Senior Services, which oversees licensing disputes and many parts of the audit, the agency claims the audit used a small cherry-picked sample size to reach its conclusions. In a response letter, the department said it's implementing a new report in its tracking system to determine if dispensaries are overselling. Why? It's so unnecessary. Despite the audit findings, let's just waste more money. Despite the audit findings, industry representatives say Missouri's marijuana program exceeds expectations. It's not often a new industry underpromises and overdelivers to taxpayers, but that's exactly the experience in Missouri after voters legalized medical and adult use marijuana, said Andrew Mullins, MoCan Trade Executive Director. Right on. Mullins said the program has created more than 20,000 jobs and delivered hundreds of millions in tax revenue. Missouri veterans have received more than $105 million directly from legal cannabis sales. Wow. On a day where I'm learning that benefits are being cut by the Trump administration, it sounds like a good day to decriminalize and deschedule marijuana. In fact, Missouri veterans have already received more than $105 million directly from legal cannabis sales, with that number continuing to increase. Fitzpatrick said the audit findings provide lessons for future large-scale government programs. No shit, Sherlock. This is something that can be transferred to the next time a state department or a city is tasked with setting up a large program. I got into cannabis specifically because I saw it was my way to experience how we industrialize in the United States on a wide scale level and change laws all in one bucket, just like the steel industry, just like any other major tech industry that we've had. And the fact that they're just now like, oh, it's so frustrating. Thank God for the sticky green because that made me laugh through that story. Gentlemen?
I've been part of this game here in California. Whenever you limit, especially retail businesses, you set up a set stage for someone. You know, if you say we got 10 licenses, number 11, boo-hoo, maybe number 12 and 13, somebody cheated, you know, we're going to go to court and threaten. And what I've also seen, this is kind of disgusting, where, you know, politicians will tell you hire me as a consultant or my wife or whatever at $5,000 a month, and I'll make sure you get whatever you want. I've, you know, been there and just kind of make you want to retch, open your mouth a bit, but it's some of the things we've seen, and I don't want to say it's human nature, but you see it so damn much. You know, will somebody take a look at this? And I guess what you said earlier, Shaun, was the answer here. Green light it, okay? Zone it where you want it to be. And if you can't be successful at selling weed for a profit, then you know what? Go get a day job. Like if you can't make money at a whorehouse, you know, you go get a day job, okay? This will make money, okay? Not like the black market, but people want weed and all the parts of it. And that's what the hemp industry showed us. It's like, can you just get out of the way? Treat it more like alcohol and let people know, yeah, you're getting high. We understand that. Just don't hurt people. Leave people alone. When we do that, I don't see that it's going to take a boot up a lot of people's asses to fix this. And, you know, it irritates me because I'm in California where we're supposed to have been whatever the gods of cannabis. And we have putos in this state have screwed this thing up so badly. I'm just disgusted.
Putos.
putos. See, I remember that from prison. Yeah.
Muy bien, Dale. Stone?
I 100% agree with Dale. I mean, I don't know much else I can add to it. The putos there. No, hey, Missouri did. I mean, they came out swinging. They really did. Obviously, there were some things that weren't done right. But hey, man, they've done so good to this point. I think they've some small tweaks, and they're one of the best legal states that are doing it right now.
Yeah, I'd say Missouri and Minnesota are really earnestly trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
I know we're fighting like hell in Texas. I don't think our regulators are earnestly trying to figure it out. Not yet, but we still have a whole legislative session. I got to give props to You Have to Sue after, because then they got 68 more licenses. Go for it. And someone needs to invest the money. There's like a process. There's a piece of everybody has a piece in this process, including litigation. And then Nate, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Just to add real quick with regards to what you said with the trap. And if I'm not mistaken, and California isn't a great example of a place to look at with a deli model, but that deli style model where the flower isn't necessarily prepackaged prior to arriving at the dispensaries, it's allowed to be in a bulk form still, meaning that typically there is less regulation or concern with how much of that bulk you're ultimately selling. From what I've seen, and this is only in limited degrees and only certain markets, again, and not the ones in my backyard, when you play with a deli model, you actually give opportunity for the trap market to go through the white market. And that's not a bad thing. Like, you're actually allowing for things to be tested and safe, even if it is being sold through an illegitimate means and on the streets. As you pointed out, that's going to happen anyway. What's the harm now of actually providing a corridor, legally speaking, for that to go through the white market? Sure, it's not ideal, but it's the best level of control you'll ultimately have on that. To me, it doesn't seem that's human nature. I'm not incredibly wise for coming to that realization right there. That's in front of all of us. The fact, therefore, that that's something that's still fought against. Why? Like, it's just such a waste of time and energy. And at the end of the day, a deli model is going to save so much garbage, so much trash, so many other negative aspects of this industry that don't necessarily need to exist. Why can't we have stuff like that and just point to less regulation equals, and I think this is a point you were brushing on earlier, less regulation equals just a better, more healthy environment overall for the industry.
Regulation helps the trap, man. Come on. The tighter the regulation, the more you're helping the trap.
100%. The less regulation you have, the more closely related the trap and the legal market are allowed to be. And if the legal market has certain definitions, say, of safety, then why aren't we exploring this?
Good point.
It's like this false narrative that we've come to believe, especially happens in lawmaking when your job is to make laws, that you think more laws will solve the problem. Nope. Like, pull back, guys. We need I think one thing that the public group wants to do this next year is a list of pulling back laws, things we can repeal instead of more things we can push. But Dale, I'm going to give you the last word and the introduction for your story. Dale has been an attorney since the Reagan administration, y'all. He has represented physicians, hospitals, insurance companies, cops, corrections officers, and for the last 25 years, he specialized in cannabis law. He served a 5-year federal prison sentence for helping medical marijuana patients and managed to save his law license. Damn, that's some good lawyering. He is blunt, honest, and unconcerned with public opinions, and he will tell you how to piss up a rope. He is your favorite Theo Local. You can find him at the law offices of Dale Schafer. Dale, last word on the last story, and then tell us, what do you got for us today?
Well, human nature is coming to play here, and our policymakers just do not want to recognize human nature. Our country started with telling the king, we're not going to follow your rules. That was how we got started. And rules that the public decides are just not logical or stupid for them, they're not going to follow. If you don't recognize that as the de facto reality on the ground, then the trap's just laughing at you because they are meeting the customer where they are. Okay? And the industry is not. They're trying to artificially control everything. And if you know, the government can screw up a wet dream. I'm trying not to cuss too much because YouTube will pull a plug on us. And that's my experience. And all this is just a denial that human beings want to do this. Tell you to accept the facts. It's not really hurting anybody. Okay? You can manufacture harm, but the facts don't prove it out. And we deal with emotional truths here. And that's what my story is going to be about, emotional truths. And you just want to sock some people in the face when they give you their emotional truth, and it's like flat earthers. You just want to throw them off a building. Now, it's Tio Loco and Jason's favorite Full-of-Shiticus here. So here we go. My story's from Marijuana Moment. It was written by Kyle Yeager yesterday. And the headline is Arizona senators take up bills to criminalize excessive marijuana smoke, even on private property. And this caught my attention because as an attorney, we love ambiguous words. What does excessive mean? I don't know. It's the Lawyers Full Employment Act. If we get paid to fight about what is a vague and ambiguous word. Excessive, what does that mean? I also have had to deal with local zonings and things like that. And local jurisdictions maintain traditional police powers to be able to look for the health, safety, welfare. Okay. We also have emotional truths. And that's what I see coming out of this. The guy that's pushing this is a Republican. I'm not afraid to give them their props. I'm not afraid to tell them they're stupid when they're acting stupid. And this is pretty stupid. Okay? And I normally don't do this, but I wanted to read to you all some of the nonsense this guy had to say. I'm hearing from some people that depending on your neighbor's situation, they may not be able to have their kids go outside because the marijuana smoke is so potent. Oh my God, the children. It can even creep into your own house, or in my case, into my garage. Okay. But experiencing now what's happened, even in my own neighborhood, is a pretty frustrating situation. You should be responsible neighbors if you're going to smoke pot. It can be a real issue for families. Okay. And then the nonsense about we don't want our kids out there doing this because I'm pretty sure that marijuana smoke has a different impact than, say, other smoke that might make you cough, i.e. tobacco smoke. I don't want my kids to get high. If someone wants to get high on their own, let them get high on their own. So what this struck me as, these are emotional truths that people have. And it gets very frustrating when someone just believes in their soul. If my kid smells marijuana smoke, he's going to get high, he's going to fall into drug abuse, and he's like Kurt Cobain. It's like, that's an emotional truth. And how do you shake people loose from that? Okay. I don't know how to do that, because as soon as you challenge their emotional truth with facts, their butt puckers up, you can see it in their face, and the next thing you know, they're coming out swinging. Now, I can tell you when I was arrested, okay, I was in my kitchen making pot brownies or something. I stunk like weed terribly. Okay, they threw me in the front of the undercover Subaru with DEA agents, and we had an interesting drive. Buy me a drink, give me a joint, and we'll talk about this. But the old dog DEA agent, when it got to trial, he took the witness stand and said, I stunk so badly of weed that he was getting high. And you're trying to bite your lips, like you're full of shit. And Tony Serra, God love him, my attorney, he brought him back that, did the music suddenly sound better to you? And everyone in the classroom's like chuckling because we know he's full of shit. But these are emotional truths for people, and they are deep. And if you think that smelling weed's going to get you stoned, you believe the Pope's Presbyterian, okay? Come on, stop this stuff, really. But these are deep-seated beliefs. Shaking them loose is difficult, if not impossible, okay? And people that get into policy positions like this guy, who has that sort of a knee-jerk emotional reaction to, oh, we got to protect my kids from smelling weed. And then not understanding that tobacco smoke actually kills people. I mean, it's like 8,000 people a week die from cancer caused by smoking tobacco. Not a single one ever from smoking pot. But, oh, my God, you know, this is going to kill. And it's not like other things that you can smell. You know, it's like, stop it. You got your head about 4 foot up your ass. You don't like to be challenged with facts because it's cognitive dissonance in your head based upon your emotional truths. And at some point, we'll get beyond this and people go, oh, you were right all along. But we're still in that point where you have to grab some knuckleheads by the throat and shake them. It's like, I don't care what your mommy taught you. Facts are different. It doesn't do this. I don't think this is going to go very far because, you know, even in both sides of the aisle, when you get to closed doors, people look and go, this is horse shit. You know, come on. I may not say it publicly. I don't want to embarrass you. But behind closed doors, even the cops go, come on, this is nonsense. If you want to protect people from something about cannabis, okay, age gate it. Keep your kids away from it. Honestly do that, like you do with alcohol. Okay? I mean, I started smoking pot when I was a teenager in high school, and I don't recommend it for other people. If you do it, I'm not going to say you're bad, but, you know, there's issues and questions going on there. But certainly, by the time you get to 21, if I can have a shot of whiskey, why can't I take a hit off a vape pen? Okay, or have a gummy to help me sleep at night? What is the problem here? And we're not getting to that point in having honest discussions. And this article just, it makes me chuckle, but it also makes me angry that we're still in 2026 having to have discussions with people who are elected to office and they just are so clueless about things and they're making policy. I'm going to throw this back at you guys for what you think.
Man,
Dale.
I'd like to speak, I believe, for all people in the cannabis community when I say fuck off. Like, are you kidding me, dude? Like, and we've had to deal with something like this, not cannabis related, but in Austin, like people got pissed off at all the barbecue places popping up, and that's a legitimate, you know, bitch there. Like, it's all this barbecue smoke is coming into our house, but if somebody's out smoking a joint in their backyard, come on, man. The placebo effect is a real thing, you know, and people think they're going to get high. One time, allegedly, we were all taking acid when we were teenagers. And then this one guy, Evan, I won't say your last name, Evan. We gave him just a piece of paper, and he told us that he had never taken it before, but he had the best trip that night. It was the wildest thing, 100% placebo effect. So that's what's happening here. People think it's this evil, dirty weed, and yeah, exactly. If my kid smells it, I'm going to get high. I mean, did you really get high when you smelled it at a whatever concert? Come on, people.
You're making me laugh, Stone, because it used to be my favorite game to play with the girls in high school was giving them not alcohol and then seeing exactly what happened next. And I was like, this is crazy. This is hilarious. I think also, Dale, you cracked me up too. So you were making the point serious, but you brought me back to when I got arrested. And you said cops behind the scenes feel a certain way. So much so, even when I got arrested and they were booking me, they'll try to flirt with you, ladies. They will try to flirt with you and ask you out. My mugshot is so despondent and like, I can't believe this is fucking happening right now. Oh, sorry, Jason. I didn't drop an F-bomb last broadcast, but I did today.
It's late enough for an F-bomb.
Yeah.
Same though. And you're like, the cognitive dissonance is so real in America right now. Like, we have law enforcement officers complaining that they're undateable. And then at the same time, having to give everybody hell. It's like, we got to do better. As if I ever do run for an office or become a legislator in some way, we got to write better laws for our law enforcement officers so that way they can be good human beings, because this is so fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous, guys.
Well, when
Nate,
I
appreciate it.
DEA guys were these typical, you know, hard ass anti-drug people. And when I was taken to jail, one of my best friend's son helped book me in. Okay. They turned me over to him and were like, really? I got to squat and lift my sack for this shit? Is that what we're talking about here? they're like, this is nonsense, Dale. But yeah, I'm going in for a 5-piece, dude. Okay, this is nonsense, but they understand. And I've talked to this same guy multiple times. Out on the street, they don't give two shits if you're smoking weed. If you're beating people up, if you got a gun, you're stealing stuff, things like that, they got concerns. Domestic violence is a bigger problem than people smoking pot. But they had to put on their game face because that was what was expected of them. And at this point, I think even the rank and file law enforcement officers, like, can we move on to something? We have real crime out there. It's concerning to us. And this is not real crime.
No, I'd
Yeah,
say there's at this point any kind of argument made in against cannabis, in favor of keeping it illegal is laughable. I literally cannot think of one non-laughable argument for it at this point. There's so much evidence stacked against it. And even these fantasy scenarios where the sky's going to come crashing down. How long ago was Prop 215? 96? I mean, there are people who have lived and died within that span of years. You know what I mean? Like, this is not this isn't no longer of a fly by night kind of scenario. Every concern is evaporated. This is surrounding Dale's story, where there's somebody who still lives in that damned version of a reality that literally has no connection to science and history. I mean, I feel bad for somebody if they want that perspective, and then they literally want to talk to anybody listening to me right now, because anybody who has any sense is going to be able to steamroll over this argument. To therefore be able to say something that's just so either blatantly incorrect or aware that you're lying is just fucking insulting. Sorry, that's just like, I didn't know any other way to present it.
Okay,
It's
guys,
just
now you gotta do
insulting.
promo. You guys got to find us on Rumble and X, because we can't. YouTube and the F-bomb don't go together. But Nate, thank you.
Were those
We
two
all love
close
State.
back to back? I'm just going to relight my joint.
That we're having trouble with that. But we're going to hop to Stone. Stone, I'm not going to use Jason's intro for you because it's a bunch of jokes and republicanisms. So Stone, my good friend, my friend out of Austin, who I know and love to smoke with so well. Tell us, what news have you brought for us today? It's a fun conversation.
Bring in the news. I got some good news out of Hawaii, actually. Lawmakers in Hawaii just approved a bill that sounds simple, but for patients could mean everything. Right now, if you're a qualifying medical cannabis patient in Hawaii, you submit your registration and then you wait. You wait for the state to process it. You wait for the card. You wait for while your condition does not wait. And under this new legislation sponsored by Senator Angus McKelvey, patients would be able to access medical cannabis immediately after submitting the registration. No more sitting around while the mail moves at government speed. Originally, the bill would have allowed a one-time interim purchase of up to 2 ounces. Lawmakers weren't having it. They amended it down to 1 ounce, a compromise, not exactly a free-for-all. Senator Joy San Buenaventura, who chairs the Health and Human Services Committee, said that the state's regulators can track those interim sales through administrative rules. She also made it personal, referencing her own family's experience supporting a terminally ill relative who really needed it, that one-time use. And let's not forget, that's the part that people forget, excuse me. This isn't about recreational legalization. This is about someone in pain, someone nauseous from chemo, someone who can't sleep, someone who doesn't have time to wait for a laminated card. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Hawaii has long been one of those states that feels like it's on the edge of broader cannabis reform, but never quite jumps. The Senate tends to be more reform-friendly, the House, not so much, and this year is no different. While the Senate advanced this medical access fix, House lawmakers quietly let a pair of adult use legislation bills die. Even a proposal to put legalization before voters at the ballot didn't have enough support to move forward. So medical access inches forward, adult use stalls again. At the same time, the state released an economic impact report estimating that if Hawaii legalized recreational cannabis, it could generate between 46 million and 90 million per month by year 5. That includes tourism dollars, and if there's one thing Hawaii understands, it's their tourism economics. Still, lawmakers couldn't get access, they couldn't get it across the finish line. Meanwhile, other reforms continue to chip away at the edges. The governor signed legislation allowing caregivers to grow up for up to 5 patients instead of just 1, The state finalized rules allowing dispensaries to sell more accessories like vaporizers and grinders. Lawmakers sped up expungements for past cannabis offenses. So you see the pattern. They're not slamming the door. They're just opening it very, very slowly. Now, there is one wrinkle though that deserves attention. The broader medical expansion bill signed last year included a large state provision allowing the Department of Health to access medical marijuana patients' records held by doctors for essentially any reason. Advocates have raised legitimate concerns about privacy, and in a world where federal rescheduling is still unresolved, patient confidentiality is not a small issue. Speaking of federal policy, Hawaii's health department has affirmed support for rescheduling cannabis. As you know, the Biden administration began that process and has since dragged on. President Trump has publicly said that he wants it done now. We're still waiting. So here we are. In Hawaii, patients may soon be able to walk into a dispensary the same day they register instead of starting at a mailbox. That's progress, measured, limited, but real. And in a state where legalization keeps slipping through the cracks, sometimes that's how reform happens, not with fireworks, but with small paperwork adjustments. 1 ounce at a time. I'm Stone Slade with the High at 9 News.
Yeah, well, the experience that I had with the government having confidential information about you is rather sickening. When Molly and I started doing this, I researched how I protect your confidential information. And under California law, if you came to me as an attorney, I referred you to the physician. It's covered by the attorney-client privilege. Okay, doctor-patient privilege, they blow through that very easily. But I can defend the attorney-client privilege. So that's how we took this. They said you can share with cops that we have a recommendation. Nothing else. We honored that. The federal government rolled in on us. It took like 5,000 files, my attorney-client files. We had a battle. He said, it's a crime, fraud, you're breaking the law. We're going to cut through the privilege. Okay. What the DEA did is they went through and turned over 100 of these files to the California Medical Board without a subpoena, without authorization from the patients. He then went after Molly with an accusation. We rolled into the court and pointed out to the judge that, you have an authorization for this. No. You have a subpoena or a warrant. No. Well, then they're in unlawful possession of confidential medical information. The judge threw everything out. Okay? And you talk about shit and Twinkies. These guys were really upset. But what they did is that they didn't care about your confidential information. They were going to use it as a cudgel, go after Molly. And thank God a judge stepped in and said, oh, no, you won't. But I don't trust any of them with any of your information because behind the scenes, they play this game. I work with law enforcement and I benefited from this game before. Okay, so I understand how it gets played. But when it comes to your information about whether you have HIV or some other things that have serious downsides to public knowledge about this, I get really angry when the government plays pity-patty this stuff. It's confidential. I get sued if I do this. They did it with impunity. Nothing ever happened to them other than they lost the case. I don't trust them because of my real life experience. And this was at a high stage where we caught them doing things that the law says you're not supposed to do. And there were the cops, did it anyway. So I get really concerned when you're supposed to trust the government with your information. I trust them as far as I can throw them, and I have a terrible back.
Hey, so just to throw it out there, I'm kind of curious. Anybody knows what the demographics are for who is voting which way and who is pushing which way for in Hawaii? Because I'd be really, just to throw it out there, Pacific Islanders and being able to live off the earth and especially express their own varieties of what they can provide to the world between their culture and their knowledge seems to fit them really well. Who's the ones in Hawaii saying, no, this shouldn't be legalized yet? Because just to throw it out there, I know what money and tourism look like. And I think that point was made already in this for the story. So I got to throw that out there. If there was one place, and it's probably more obvious than anything, it's just money and trying to keep the status quo and some weird wrestle of what can you do with trying to maximize this land? And I don't know. It just seems so wrong if that's not what the people of Hawaii, the indigenous people, actually want. But instead, the people who have just been simply controlling the island in every single way they possibly can for the last 100-something years, to just keep that going seems kind of gross. It's not a subject I know very much about, but man, I love to see cannabis tourism thrive over there. And I can't for the life of me think of one good scientific, medical, health-based reason why it isn't. I mean, even money-wise.
It's not that.
It was a mix. We actually covered this yesterday, oddly enough, and it was a mix. And what we learned was their indigenous grows, or people who are of indigenous backgrounds or islanders who would support it to an extent, but do not want large MSOs coming in and running the same game in Hawaii. And I think you can see that with how things might have turned out in other islands, like and specifically like what people are trying to figure out how to do in like Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, other Latin American spaces. Similar story. There's a pattern here. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a yes and hold on.
It sounds like a lot of the...
It's good.
And it sounds like a lot of the hold on, and medically they're pretty accessible. Like they've accepted repeatability now for, I want to say, over a decade, where if you have a medical license in one state, it's relatively few steps to have that medical license transferred to Hawaii for your upcoming trip. And they make that pretty easy, and they spell it out pretty well on their website and all that fun stuff last time I checked. So they're not trying to delay it necessarily from people having just general access. But isn't there like only one dispensary? And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. I think the regulation currently is one dispensary per island. Which is,
I don't know.
Is that allowed? Is it more extensive than that? Okay, all right. I'm glad to be wrong on that one. Okay,
yeah,
it does seem to be a little sad that the reason for wanting to restrict it is because they feel that it would be a runaway train with MSOs and not a version of Hawaii for Hawaiians kind of idea.
I just want to correct what I said just a little bit, or add an asterisk. That doesn't mean that also there weren't prohibitionists and money, like what you and Stone have suggested is also true. I'm just highlighting that the conversation is a little more nuanced than the people just want it. The indigenous people want it. They do some, but it's a nuanced conversation that deserves that kind of respect because they have already experienced through other commodities. Hello, pineapple.
Dole.
Know?
That's the first thing that came to mind.
Yes, the history of Hawaii is very deep and rich, and they had their own monarchy, an indigenous one. So I get the hesitation.
No, they have valid reservations, but
it's sick that they, I mean, as a non-Hawaiian, it's sick that they have to worry about that stuff. They can't progress something that they would like to know and do because they understand that it's opening floodgates. I mean, that sucks. Can't we have it? I mean, what I would say to each extreme is, on that extreme, I'm so sorry you guys have to deal with that. That sucks worse than most of the things I've ever heard that sucked before, where you can't use your own land and your own ability to make money and support yourselves because you instantly know that the second you say, I guess this is okay, everybody's going to swarm in and destroy it. I mean, that sucks. And to the prohibitionists, F yourselves, because you're not helping anybody other than trying to pander to a very small group of people who they themselves have a quiet, closeted bunch who absolutely love cannabis.
Small group of people with deep pockets, though, and that's when it comes down to it. That's the bottom line. It's passing what is the House, and it's passing the Senate, but when it gets to the House, it's the people in the House that they won't even bring it up for a vote. I mean, it never makes that a committee.
They can go after themselves.
I was sent to Hawaii in the federal system, and I spent some time there with island boys who were growing weed, and also a lot of island boys who were involved in meth. And it scared the policymakers in Hawaii that so much mess was coming in, and a lot of the same channels were bringing in weed. So a lot of their knee-jerk reaction against weed got tied up in was devastating meth did to the islands. And it was pretty obvious there. I mean, I had a lot of long discussions with guys who were out growing weed, and the average person didn't really care, but the government came after it because they thought we're going to go after all drugs, and they lumped cannabis in with heroin and fentanyl and meth, and then we can't win that fight because that's an emotional truth and our facts don't matter. That was part of what was going on. And Roger Christie, I don't know who he is, he was a former airline pilot and things like that. He's been fighting for years just to get medical open. And it's frustrating because they threw him in jail as a message. So he and I have some of that same in common. It's like the message that you're getting back from me is you pissed me off because you're so goddamn stupid to lump me in with meth people. Okay, I'm not that at all. I abhor the subject. It killed people in my family. I hate it. But this is where we end up. It's like my story. Some guy believes smelling pot's going to make your kid high. You can't, like, I believe the earth is flat. Well, why? Okay. Where are we here? You're dumb as a box of rocks. But people get offended when you point out you're dumb as a box of rocks. When they're making policy and they're dumb as a box of rocks, at what point do you stop tap dancing around them and tell them, you know, I think your mom dropped you on your head a lot when you were a kid. You need to rethink.
Dale, thank you for that. And with that, we are going to cut to a quick commercial break to give our team a chance to reset.
I just ordered the summertime strawberry salad when added steak on top here at Anna's. Make sure you do the same thing too next time you're in downtown Long Beach. Come on down and check out Anna's joint on the 400 block of Pine Street. They have amazing selection of beers, foods, and when you come down here to Anna's, you can even challenge me to a game of shuffleboard if you want to lose. Did you get that? So, next time you're in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue, make sure you stop by Anna's Joint on the 400 block. Not only do they have Anna's Joint, this restaurant and bar, but they also have the amazing deli next door, and then next door to that they have a very exotic flower shop. You may want to stop by and say hi.
Force field of looking. Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. We have got Nate confessing his heart out. No, I'm just kidding. Papa Dale reminds us what the limit of the statute. Dale, what is it? Limitations? Statute of limitations?
Statute of limitations.
Run, Nate. Go ahead. Let's be honest, buddy.
Nate, you've got our next story. Welcome back. Commercial break ended. Founder of Bell Costa Labs, who was unjustly prosecuted and forced to give up his lab license by the DCC and California government, he now focuses on educating the masses and on the nuances of testing on his new educational platform, Teaching Bud, available on YouTube and other social media platforms. Nate Winokur, friends.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Shaun. And today, guys, strap in your nerdy selves because the article that Jason asked me to cover actually today, he went for about as nerdy as possible, and I consider it a privilege to be able to cover a study. A portable, low-cost electrochemical test accurately detects THC and CBD. And I don't assume you guys are immediately checking out the article itself, but it shows in the little image of somebody essentially having this attachment for their phone, and the attachment itself is where you would introduce the sample to. So that's, relevant to this whole idea of this simplicity that they're trying to get out there. And I'll cover it in a little bit more detail as we go through it, but the article states, a new study published in the peer-reviewed journal Talanta details the development of portable electrochemical method capable of simultaneously detecting and quantifying delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC, and cannabidiol, which is CBD, offering what researchers describe as a low-cost and field-deployable tool for cannabis product quality control. The research was conducted by scientists from Universidad de Federal dos Valles, I'm going to butcher. I'm sorry, guys. There's literally 3 or 4 universities, and my tongue is not quick enough this morning. Their work centers on the use of unmodified carbon screen printed electrodes in a strongly alkaline medium to distinguish and measure both cannabinoids in a single rapid analysis using a square wave voltammetry. The team identified distinct oxidation processes for THC and CBD, enabling simultaneous detection without the need for expensive instrumentation or electrode modifications. THC exhibited a single irreversible oxidation process, while CBD demonstrated 5 defined electrochemical processes, including both reduction and oxidation events. Notably, the researchers report that CBD's altered electrochemical behavior and alkaline conditions allowed for cleaner differentiation from THC. The method achieved the limits of detection of 0.09 micromoles per liter for THC and 2.72 micromoles per liter for CBD. Precision testing showed strong reproducibility, with relative standard deviations below 5.6% for peak currents and under 2% for peak potentials when using either the same or different electrodes. To validate real-world applicability, the researchers analyzed 35 seized cannabis samples and 7 cannabis-based consumer products. Results showed good agreement with gas chromatography mass spectrometry, which is GCMS, the standard laboratory technique for cannabinoid identification. Man, that's wrong. That is such a wrong sentence. I can't go into, for the sake of not going off on the strongest tangent ever, underline how wrong that last statement was.
You can totally go off. We are not under any time pressure right now, so you feel free to
We'll cover this in a little bit, but GCMS suggests that gas chromatography with mass spectrometry would be the ideal method for testing cannabis, for testing cannabinoids. That couldn't be more far from the truth in a science end. We don't use gas chromatography of any form. We use liquid chromatography, as liquid chromatography gives much better resolutions between THC and THCA, CBD and CBDA. In other words, and going forward from there, the non-decarboxylated versus the decarboxylated versions of everything. Mass spectrometry will only simply give you further levels of specificity and verification by which to test certain seemingly obscure compounds, nothing of which this matches the description of. So what they're doing is they're basically saying that THC versus THCA, CBD versus CBDA, it's acknowledging it can't necessarily, reading this, test for the differentiation in those chemicals. And so what it's doing is comparing itself to gas chromatography, which is an older, archaic version of testing, which in and itself could not, because gas chromatography, it turns the compounds to gas. It's basically an oven, and it detects, it vaporizes these compounds, and then it detects what these compounds are that have vaporized. But this means that something that's non-decarboxylated, like THCA or CBDA, you can't test the non-decarboxylated versions of them, because by the definition of testing through gas chromatography, it vaporizes them and it turns them all into just THC or just CBD. You don't get that resolution between non-decarboxylated and decarboxylated, in other words. So the fact that this technology, A, can't do that, and B, compares itself to an archaic technology that couldn't do that, but is not an accurate statement to how things are currently tested, assumes, if somebody were to pick something apart at the very letters, assuming that they've taken a lot of these statements from the company itself, which to me seems very much like they went through their basic white papers and tore half of it out for the sake of writing this article. That basically means that you're looking at them deliberately using a version of, I did an article on this a couple of weeks ago, a version of bias, essentially research bias, as they called it, where you are deliberately leaving out parts of science and how people do things for the sake of making an impact or making a point. And so, not my favorite article in the world, but I do like the opportunity to discuss this kind of stuff with you guys. So go, Jason. The standard laboratory technique for cannabinoid identification, wrong. Addition recovery experiments yielded values near 100% for both THC and CBD, further supporting accuracy. The study also reports successful detection of structurally related semi-synthetic cannabinoids, including delta-8 THC, delta-8 THC acetate, and HHC, without overlapping CBD oxidation peaks. This is particularly relevant as semi-synthetic cannabinoids have become more prevalent in both retail markets and seized materials. Unlike chromatography-based techniques, which require specialized laboratory equipment and trained personnel, this electrochemical approach is designed for rapid screening in field or high-throughput settings. The authors conclude that the method provides a reliable and practical alternative for law enforcement agencies and manufacturers needing fast quantitative cannabinoid analysis. So, a couple of quick things there that are on the interesting side. Number one, a little bit of possible real-world application for this type of equipment. If it's able to detect semi-synthetic cannabinoids on the fly, and should those become separated, segmented from, for the sake of how we see certain areas of legalization and potential movement in the hemp market and so on and so forth, depending on how that closes out by year's end, we're thinking that could actually have a pretty good application. It could help you with rapid detection of being able to determine what you're looking at, if you've got synthetic cannabinoids there versus plant-grown cannabinoids. So good to know, right? So that's kind of helpful. Number two, let's go backwards here. They cover the idea for compounds to oxidize as a means of being able to detect things. One, that's kind of interesting, being able to use how much a product has oxidized, and they're basically introducing a solution that oxidizes it thoroughly, and it's this non-reversible process. It creates this quantifiable number, and so you can see how much oxidizes in the sample. You can read the amount of oxidized material, and you can say, this is that thing. Interesting. There's going to be different detectors, one would imagine, therefore, different things you would plug into your phone, if that's even how it works, that would basically allow to test different areas of oxidation. For instance, THC and or CBD definitely would not oxidize like HHC would, I would say. Not having studied this exactly, I'd be really surprised if there was any comparability in how those chemicals broke down, and it would make sense that they would have different electrode sensor, attachments and things like that would allow this all to work. The measurement of oxidation, though, is kind of interesting to read from. What if the sample they're reading is partially oxidized? For people who have ever produced cannabis, you oxidize that ish all the time. You can measure the quality of a production crew by how much of the material they oxidize as they're producing through your cannabis. So, and you, on top of that, maybe it's being extracted from or utilizing older material that's already oxidized somewhat. Like, you're not really creating that much resolution, I guess you could say, again, for the ability to be able to detect what this looks like before and after whatever catalyst they're using, whatever solution they're utilizing that you're supposed to essentially pre-prepare on the fly and then drop into the electrode. Lastly, and feel free if anything else comes to mind or any other qualities from the article that you'd like to ask about, but that measurement of micromoles, although they sound like nice, fun, mini numbers, they are not actually that comparable to what we see based on current measurement techniques. It's better than that stuff that you do on paper, which is called TLC, thin layer chromatography. It's better than that. That has a pretty big, last I looked into it, which admittedly has been a couple of years, that has a pretty big jump in terms of where accuracy may lie. This one is not as accurate as one would expect, and I might be misquoting it from looking at those numbers. CBD accuracy isn't all the way there. There's actually quite a bit of swing where people in our industry who are used to reviewing numbers like how much CBD is in a product might look at that level of swing and go, no, that's not even a helpful tool. That's a ballpark, if that. And so the measurements systems that they use, so many decibels below 0 of a micromole or below 1 of a micromole, is really honestly not a great means of being able to impress upon us that they feel that their technology is apples to apples. They deliberately utilized a measurement system that seems like it's accurate without actually scientifically being more accurate than what's currently at play. So not a bad article for the sake of being able to discuss some of the cruxes of cannabis study and stuff like that. And it's an interesting technology, and the idea of being able to have this catalyst that oxidizes cannabinoids and that we can then read that oxidation, that sounds pretty cool. The idea of it saying, hey, look at what it replaces, a team working in a lab with, high precision equipment, not even close, in my humble opinion, at least from what I can draw from how this article was drawn out. And anybody with any input, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Dale, I want to hear from you on applicability and evidence as far as law enforcement, because it sounds, from all I have to say is, it sounds like a cool, you should have developed that into an app for consumers, because it is not all the way baked for law enforcement. And I feel like Dale's going to tell us why.
Well, real quick too, it doesn't cover concentrates or edibles or any of that stuff. And I can tell you from having studied those things that it's not a one size fits all. Like not even close. So this is going to be much more one dimensional even than I think even the article suggested.
It would be cool if they focused on developing tools for consumer education that then became very valuable to government contract, but instead they develop half-baked bullshit for government contract, forgetting completely that the end user at the end of this trickle is that's how the business works, guys. Dale, tell us how it works with the law.
What I was thinking about the de facto utilization of this, where would it actually be legitimately used? And in law enforcement, I mean, I guess you can torture a reasonable suspicion on this kind of a test that somebody's breaking the law. But then when you scratch and sniff at it, okay, somebody's got hemp and it's supposed to be below, 0.3% THC. Okay, is that perhaps a tool to use for law enforcement? I would say it would be, as Nate has pointed out, if you're going to use that to try and, go after someone criminally, an expert would tear that apart. It's not accurate. Like the smell of something. Oh, yeah. Well, hemp smells just like, marijuana when you burn it. So does that give you probable cause to go do things to interrupt people's, lives, liberty, and all that kind of stuff? As a consumer product, perhaps, okay, but they got to sell me a whole lot more on what it's going to actually be used for. And in other industries, there are rapid tests that go on in other industries. My grandfather worked in the dairy industry. When you drive up with a truckload of milk, you do some rapid tests to make sure you don't have things in there that are going to cause problems. That's a utilization that perhaps could be done. I mean, there are contracts written out there that if you're going to deliver some weed to me, I want it to be within a particular range of THC, okay, or I'm not going to pay top dollar. These contracts are out there, and it might be something that you could utilize when you go pick it up from the farm or when it delivers to your manufacturing facility. Quick test, is it within the range from 10 to 15% THC, whatever, that will accept it? There might be some applicability there, but it's like a novelty, okay, for me. And at least I'm not going to try to use it to have somebody blow into it and determine your quantitative level of THC in your blood from it, because that's nonsense. And I'm not sure the applicability of the oxidation, because it made me think of carbon-14. We can tell the age of things to a certain number of thousands of years by the decomposition. Carbon, we can tell that, okay? But then the question is, What's this useful for? Is this some other little gizmo they want you to spend money you ain't got for shit you don't need to impress people you don't like? Is that what we're dealing with here? Okay. Because, you know, you want me to go buy stock in this company? No, I'm not going to do it. Got to convince you a little more of the applicability of this. If it's going to be used as a tool to punish people, I really have problems with this.
Wholeheartedly agree. Nate, you want the last word?
That's not the first time that somebody's tried to roll out technology in our industry. That sounds somewhat revolutionary, especially for the sake of like law enforcement. Remember the cannabis breathalyzer? And somebody or somebodies are still trying to roll that out there, but a lack of reproducible information has essentially stalled it at every level, as Dale very eloquently put. An expert witness would tear that to pieces.
And they're rolling it out for law enforcement. That's why they're prioritizing the wrong category. They need.
It seems like, I mean, it seems like, you know, a shaky bridge to me right there, because it's a stretch to try to, you know, pull something out of their proverbial arse and make it into a reality. And here we just see a version of a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, which isn't ultimately going to be that useful. I mean, what if it's something that was burnt to a crisp and fully oxidized? Well, I guess it's going to show like it's THC, even though it wasn't the least bit useful to you or I.
It's nonsense. We got to fix this on a bigger level, but we're going to end the show on a lighter note.
Now that I think about that, that means ash might be able to be comparatively like pulled in and stuff like that.
It's
like,
just ash Wednesday, so maybe we can use this stuff, right?
I mean, now you're talking about recycling. We just went the other way with it, so that's amazing. But yeah, I mean, one could potentially use a technology like this to study already burnt cannabis and showing it at a higher rate.
We're gonna end on a good note, though. Thank you to the good mood and the good note. And this is not sponsored, and Jason might get mad, but Sticky Green, damn, out of Pasadena, Texas, y'all doing a damn good job out there. Connecticut bill, because we're going to end on a good note and in a good mood. Connecticut bill would require hospitals and nursing homes to allow medical marijuana on terminally ill patients. Good news. Legislation filed today in Connecticut would require certain healthcare facilities and nursing homes to allow terminally ill medical marijuana patients to use their medicine while receiving care. House Bill 5242, introduced as a raised bill by the Joint Committee on Public Health, would mandate that hospitals, nursing homes, hospice inpatient facilities, and short-term hospital hospice permit qualifying patients, woof, that's a lot of words, people who are terminally ill and the places that support them, may use marijuana on site with specific restrictions. The bill applies to registered medical marijuana patients who have been certified by their attending physician as terminally ill, defined as having a prognosis of 1 year or less if the disease follows its natural course. Under the proposal, facilities would be required to allow marijuana, including tinctures, edibles, and topicals. However, smoking and vaping would be prohibited. If I'm terminally ill, I don't want you telling me what to do. Facilities could impose reasonable restrictions on storage and use, including requiring marijuana to be kept in a locked container to protect other patients, guests, and staff. Healthcare providers would also need to document marijuana use in a patient's medical record. It's getting absurd now, and require proof of valid registration in the state's medical marijuana program. In addition, facilities would be required to develop and distribute written guidelines governing how marijuana may be used within that facility. The bill also includes a federal safeguard, and I'm hoping maybe it'll set some federal precedent if we're talking about the right to access. If a federal or the right to try, if a federal agency, the U.S. Department of Justice or Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services were to initiate enforcement action or formally prohibit marijuana use in such facilities, compliance could be suspended until further notice. So they're warning you if federal law changes, they're going to suspend and work with feds. However, facilities could not refuse to comply solely because marijuana remains a Schedule I substance under federal law. If approved by lawmakers and signed into law, the proposal would take effect October 1st, 2026. So some good news, but also, like we've talked about all this whole hour, lots of complications when we're writing these regulations. Gentlemen?
Well, this is a subject that's irritating to me because my first duty station in the Navy was in a surgical ward where we had hospice beds. I've literally sat next to people, holding their hand as we watched them take their last breaths. And if you're in pain, I just shoot them up with morphine. We still had in the national formulary there called Brompton solution, heroin and cocaine. Nobody gives two shits if you're going to get addicted or any of this other nonsense when you're checking out. So it irritates me that we still got to play this game. And the reality of titration is that using your lungs to titrate is the quickest way to do this, and your brain will tell you I've had enough and I'll stop. And that's just a reality of taking care of people that are dying, and I'm in pain or I'm going to whatever, and they take a couple of hits and they feel better. It works, and it doesn't have to deal with the politics. And when you're talking to somebody who's dying, all right, they don't give two shits about all these other nonsensical political issues. They want to be made comfortable. They're at resolution with their death. Families are trying to deal with it. And these are things that, they left lasting impressions for me in human dignity. And this is a lot of what we're talking about here is human dignity. You get the choice when you're checking out to do what you feel is going to make you have that last path in as manageable a way as you can. And politicians and the cops, get out of here. I had to deal with petty, chiefs and stuff like that. I don't know what branch you were in, but these anal compulsive chads walking around that, oh, we can't do this. We just put them into a wheelchair and wheel them out in the parking lot and roll the joint up and give it to them. That's how we fixed the problem. We had to play games and people got in trouble, but all the doctors and nurses knew what we were doing. Okay, it was kind of a game we're playing. And when you get the tight-ass politicians out of this and people who they're caring and got to, enforce all the rules, this is about human dignity. It shouldn't be this hard. Okay, but it is because we all live in a world where people believe certain things that don't make any sense. We've covered that multiple times in our discussions today. And you shouldn't have to build a $2 million HVAC system to allow somebody to vape in their room. It's like, stop. Can we just get beyond this and look at people's dignity and try to deal with the human being as they are with all their warts and all that kind of stuff? Just love people as opposed to thinking that you're in charge and I've got to enforce the rules and all that other kind of absolute nonsense. That's what I got to say about this.
It's an interesting area, I think, of thought that it comes from. To me, this seems very obvious. And the fact that there's legislation around this, on one hand, good. It is good news. On the other hand, it seems like humanity catching up with logic. You know what I mean? I don't know any other way to put it. And it sucks that humanity catching up with logic is, I think, more mainstream than somebody who doesn't think in that direction would be led to believe. I surround myself and talk to people who think like me. And this kind of thing should seem obvious. It's obvious to Dale. It's obvious to you, Shaun. It's good news, right? It's obvious to me, of course. There's another side to this spectrum, which I fear is way more mainstream. And when I say way, I mean way more mainstream than how we think of this, to where, yeah, they'll come to these realizations, but it's harrowing to consider how tiptoed the measurement of people's realizations should be. that we're seeing legislation married with cannabis, married with human dignity. Harrowing. I mean, it's just the thought. I'm kind of lost. I'm just going to ramble from here, but I think the point is made. Good news, though. It's good to see, if there's a singularity between logic and humanity, this underlines that we're one step closer.
Yeah. And I think take comfort, friends. It's not that everybody, a lot of smart people and everyone else saying you're worried, like if everybody else is an idiot. I think it's partially everybody is on the same page for the most part, but a lot of us are working, trying to live our lives, and the topics of conversation around what right and wrong in our government have become so strained and difficult. It takes time for the organism. Like on an individual level, I do have faith that more people than not are truly in the middle and trying to sort this out as best as they can. And it takes us having more of those conversations and conversations like we've had today and on the show to further that work and then get that ripple going to get the larger organism working, especially when structurally it is also co-designed with a system of elite operators and laws. And we have our pathway to influence that by participating in our legislature and voting, and yes, exercising your First Amendment right and protesting. And just don't lose sight or faith that when we all come together and put in the work, the whole machine can still turn direction. It's not a fighter jet. It ain't fast, but it is a C-130. Once you crank those wheels, friends, we can turn it about. So y'all have faith, and thank you all for getting high with us today at 9, every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. PST and high noon on the East Coast. A big shout out to our sponsors and our audience and supporters for tuning in daily. And thank you for listening to the insanity that is the cannabis industry. Huge shout out to Catalyst for helping to keep the lights on. And thank you especially to the correspondents who show up every day and dedicate their time, pro bono, mind you, to help the industry and support us in this work. Thank you to Cannabis Sativa L for giving us a reason to do this every day. And thank you to Cloud Media Partners for helping us to get this all done. Elias and Gabriel out there in the metaverse. Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in and for getting high at 9 with us. Don't forget to smash that like button. I forgot to tell everybody to do it during the broadcast. Hit that button. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show.